goal of this project is to motivate humanity to begin committing greater efforts to preserving our one living planet for the benefit of all. Scientists estimate that our planet can continue to support life for another billion years or so. That would allow another 50 quadrillion humans to be born if we control our population growth and live in harmony with our living planet. 50 quadrillion is 5 followed by 16 zeros. The number of humans on Earth right now is over 7 billion, 7 followed by 9 zeros. So if we take steps right now to preserve our planet, it can support nearly 10 million times as many humans as are currently alive on Earth right now. But every year, we humans are increasing the rate at which we are depleting and polluting our planet. It's obvious that we humans on the planet right now are threatening the existence of 10 million times our number with our runaway population growth and our rapacious degradation of our planet. Every year, we consume 50% more than what our planet can replenish. Every year, we destroy a forested area bigger than the country of Greece. Every year, we increase our greenhouse gas emissions by 3%. Why are we doing all that when most of us realize that it's slowly killing our planet and sabotaging the lifetimes of humans of the future? Why do so many of our elected leaders who run the government favor policies that allow the human degradation of our planet to accelerate? The answer is that our world remains in the grip of evil, and it desperately seeks to control government. The grip of evil upon our world first manifested itself around 10,000 years ago when humans began living in settled communities. Wealth in the form of stored grain could then begin to accumulate, which a powerful minority promptly controlled. The grip of evil is powered by the greed of a small minority that is fixated on maximizing their wealth to the detriment of everyone and everything else. They have lost their empathy for humanity. Their ideology is that humanity exists primarily to serve their needs by generating wealth that can be extracted. For 10,000 years, the grip of evil reduced around 95% of humanity to the status of serfs and slaves, as the wealth they produced was extracted by a small minority of ruling elites. It wasn't until democracies began replacing monarchies over the past 200 years that the power of the small wealthy class was gradually neutered. Any successful democracy must first and foremost curtail the natural exploitive power of its wealthiest citizens. The Great Depression of the 1930s is the natural result of what happens when a democracy fails to do so. But the American public quickly wisened up. After the unregulated greed of the wealthiest Americans caused the Great Depression, their power was neutered with high taxes and rigorous government regulations. But in the intervening years, as Americans who experienced the hardships and suffering of the Great Depression passed away, memories grew dim about their natural financial exploitive power. Starting in the 1970s, the wealthiest Americans gradually managed to slip their shackles by financing the election campaigns of politicians who would do their bidding and by shaping public perceptions through news media that they had started controlling. This cozy relationship between politicians and wealthy corporate donors has been called crony capitalism. It's essentially a plutocracy, a puppet government run by a wealthy minority. There is a reason why the top 1% in America have doubled their share of the national income over the past 35 years, while the income of everyone else has stagnated. And that reason is that our democracy has failed to curtail the natural exploitive power of its wealthiest citizens and is in fact catering directly to their interests. Here is modern economic theory reduced to its simplest form. To generate money in an economy, somebody has to show up for work and actually make something with their hands that somebody else can buy and sell. But they only get compensated a small fraction of the value that they produce. The billions of dollars that Wall Street traders and investment banks play with is the hefty fraction for which workers didn't get compensated. If you think that it's the machines that make workers so productive, who do you think makes the machines? At any given moment, there is only so much money in an economy. Therefore, you can only become wealthier by making others poor. The government makes the rules for how much poorer you can make somebody. And over the past 35 years, through the mechanism of crony capitalism, politicians have tricked the public into favoring policies that have allowed the wealthiest 1% to double their extraction of wealth from the bottom 99%. I leave it to your imagination why so many of those 99% are fooled so easily into voting against their own interests. My book dives right into the matter and dredges up the ideologies that are responsible. In a democracy, politicians must repackage policies that benefit their campaign financiers to make it appear that everyone benefits. For example, politicians have deluded much of the public with the ideology that the deregulated actions of the wealthiest, most powerful citizens works towards the common good. This deeply flawed ideology forms the basis of the most extremist governments the world has ever seen. The advent of the Great Recession of 2007 was a refresher course that the deregulated actions of the wealthy minority acts only to maximize their extraction of wealth from everyone else. Like the Great Depression, the Great Recession was a natural development of deregulating the greed and restoring the inherent exploitive power of the wealthy minority. But there are other ideologies and dynamics that played crucial roles in permitting this to happen. My book does not gloss over them. Accumulating wealth has an intoxicating effect that is akin to the high experienced by a compulsive gambler. It is difficult to resist, but not everyone succumbs to it. Movie stars, musicians, and athletes can accumulate vast wealth, but they generally retain their empathy for humanity at large because that is their fan base. And their fan base determines how wealthy they get based directly on their performance. Performing their craft to perfection is their main motivation, and accumulating wealth is seen as somewhat of a side benefit. Even when accumulating wealth is their main goal, there are many wealthy company executives who retain empathy for humanity at large. Even though they realize that they could amass more wealth by paying their workers less, they share company profits more fairly with their workers, and they only lay off workers as the last possible resort. In such companies, you generally see more pride in the individual contributions to producing the best possible product. But there are millionaires and billionaires who have become intoxicated with accumulating wealth. They are not driven by passion. Rather, they are driven by and are consumed with greed. They have lost or never had empathy for humanity at large. In fact, their self-esteem is partially measured by how many more people are poorer than they are. They are heavily represented by those who were born into wealth and who had been isolated from humanity at large all their lives. The Koch brothers and the Walton family that owns Walmart are prime examples. They see humanity through the eyes of a predator, and this includes not only the humanity of the present generation, but all future generations who will inherit the living planet that is being depleted. This subset of the top 1% constitutes the grip of evil that is clamped upon our planet. There is a reason why the toxic mortgages that led to the Great Recession were called predatory loans. It was unregulated greed at work, ruining lives to turn a quick profit. Wealthy predators overinflated the value of risky mortgages that they rolled into securities, and they swindled the investors they sold them to. Then they bet against the toxic mortgage-backed securities they couldn't dump off using credit default swaps. When the securities tanked, they raked in billions from AIG, who issued the credit default swaps. When AIG went broke because of this, the American taxpayer had to step in and bail out AIG to the tune of $85 billion. The predatory subset of the top 1% essentially scraped AIG clean, and then the American taxpayer had to replenish its coffers. For those worried about the American economy sinking into socialism, we've already got it. Socialism of the rich by the poor. These wealth-extracting schemes drive home the notion that accumulating wealth is akin to compulsive gambling. The only difference is that when the predatory subset of the top 1% loses their bets, the bottom 99% has to step in and cover their losses. All these complex innovations like derivatives and credit default swaps are nothing more than different flavors of games of chance to entice compulsive gamblers to the casino that Wall Street has become through deregulation. It is a natural outcome of a democracy failing in its primary task to neuter the exploitive tendencies of its wealthiest citizens. And the mechanism behind this failure is crony capitalism. Politicians deregulating the safeguards that were put in place after the Great Depression so that they can repay and retain the cash flow from their wealthy campaign donors. But the most insidious and harmful of their predatory practices is their denial propaganda about human-caused climate change. This represents an extraction of wealth not from the present generation, but from all future generations. You know that something is amiss when 97% of climate scientists say that we need to immediately cut back on our greenhouse gas emissions, but somehow there is a public controversy about the reality of human-caused climate change. You can thank the predatory class for that. There was no controversy about climate change until the worst megapolluters of our planet went into high gear in the late 1980s and began spreading climate denial propaganda. The dissemination of climate denial propaganda is raw evil perpetrated by wealthy predators with absolutely no empathy for humanity of the present or the future. Their only consideration is increasing their wealth. They did the exact same thing in denying that lead in gasoline is an environmental health hazard and that tobacco causes lung cancer. They didn't care how many people died from cancer or lead poisoning. They were essentially preying on them to maximize their wealth. But their denial of climate change through the news media that they've bought up affects humanity of the future. Global warming will increase world hunger by reducing crop yields. It will kill millions of humans with heat waves and increasingly violent storms. It will result in the mass extinctions of plants and animals. By endangering the ability of our planet to support life, wealthy predators are preying on 50 quadrillion unborn humans with their denial propaganda about climate change. We are at a critical stage in human history. What we do in the next decade will have a great impact on the ability of our living planet to support 50 quadrillion humans over the next billion years. Wealthy predators who use their financial power to lobby the government and influence elections to their exclusive benefit are the last people that you want with the power to decide how humans use our planet for their needs. The front cover of my book presents their true aspect. They are gargantuan predators with great potential for inflicting damage upon our one living planet. Humanity is depicted at the bottom. It is being led astray with the predators' climate change denial propaganda and full-bore head ideology of depleting the Earth's resources for profit. The polluted skies and befouled land, water, and air are their excrement from gobbling up the Earth's resources and converting it into their personal wealth. Their true aspect remains hidden to the people at the bottom who kowtow to them, even though they are fully aware they are enveloped in a sickly yellowish mist from all the pollution being poured into the air that they breathe. Wherever you are on this planet, you can see that gunk hanging low on the horizon. It is the byproduct of the 100 million tons of carbon dioxide that the mega polluters are flooding into the atmosphere every single day. Climate change deniers apparently can't see it, just like they can't see the aspect of the wealthy predators that are the source of the climate change denial propaganda that they have tricked their brains into believing. But a meteor traces out an SOS and reveals the aspect of the predators. They react with malice when a figure uses a shield to reflect their image back at them. The shield has embedded in it the mysteries of the universe in their role of mapping consciousness to living creatures. Above the figure with the shield, I took the liberty of adding an image of the white dove that appeared and stayed with me for 8 months, just when I started writing this book in earnest. The meteor on the upper left represents the one I saw 5 years ago on the day that I started leaning towards abandoning this project. The meteor's 2 bright segments and the dark gap between reminded me of an SOS. It inspired me to write this book, which I entitled God Sends an SOS. But it's a God that few religions would recognize. It's a quote-unquote God that is implied by my hypothesis of consciousness mapping, who I refer to as the creating consciousness. I'm not trying to start a new religion. The only religion you need on this planet is to enjoy your brief lifetime on it without inflicting undeserved harm on others. And when you heed the wealthy predators who deny human-caused climate change to maximize your comfort in life, you are causing harm to others, namely 50 quadrillion unborn humans that you're robbing of a habitable planet. Erring on the side of caution is our moral imperative when 97% of climate experts render the exact same diagnosis about the destructive effects of our greenhouse gas emissions. If 97% of doctors tell you that you have early-stage cancer, would you ignore them? The meteor that I saw trace out an SOS 5 years ago almost symbolizes a cry for help. It started in the constellation Aquarius, my birth sign. This world needs a new age, an age of Aquarius, where we conduct ourselves not to maximize our comfort, but to preserve our living planet for the 50 quadrillion humans yet to come. In the new age, we base our decisions on what the vast majority of our scientists are saying, and not on the propaganda of wealthy predators that is contrived to maximize their wealth. Unlike the predatory subset of the wealthy class, Most humans have enough empathy for future generations to err on the side of caution and listen to what 97% of climate scientists are telling us. And there are other ideologies insidiously working to stymie worldwide action to preserve our planet. These I unmask in my book. How would this new age look like? History is always the best teacher. The years after the Great Depression, between 1950 and 1980, featured a form of capitalism with high taxes on the wealthy and heavy regulation to curtail the excesses of the wealthiest Americans. It was the best of times for ordinary Americans, and the top 1% fared pretty well too. CEOs made around 50 times what the average worker made. Corporate owners had to pay high taxes whenever they converted company profits into their personal wealth. So there was a great incentive to use company profits to reinvest in capital goods, which created good-paying jobs throughout the economy. Then the wealthy class gradually slipped their shackles by influencing election campaigns and shaping public opinion. The Great Recession of 2007 proved that the wealthy class just can't seem to get over their 10,000-year-old habit of preying on everyone else. When their shackles of rigorous regulation and high taxes were removed, they had their chance to demonstrate that they could work towards the common good. But they blew it. Like an incorrigible criminal that was released on probation, they sank right back into their old habits. Greed is a vice, and like any other vice, it must be regulated. The dissemination of climate denial propaganda on the part of wealthy predators demonstrates the true extent of the evil they are willing to perpetrate to feed their greed. What could be more evil than murdering 50 quadrillion humans by depleting and polluting the planet that they need to sustain them? For 20 years, wealthy predators have done all they could to stymie action to combat human-caused climate change. Any political ideology that fails to account for the greed of wealthy predators and curtail it for the common good is a flawed ideology. The years between 1950 and 1980 proved that high taxes on the wealthy and rigorous governmental regulations is the way to go to channel their greed towards the common good. It is a proven method of transforming greed from the wealth extractor to the engine of prosperity for all. By contrast, unregulated capitalism inevitably degenerates into a corporatocracy in which one corporation controls an industry. You can see this unfolding in the many corporate mergers you see nowadays. What you get is less competition and higher prices for lower quality products and services. What you get is the concentration of wealth in a shrinking minority, like the doubling of their share of the national income that the top 1% has sucked away from everyone else over the past 35 years. What you get is the too-big-to-fail corporations in the financial services industry who you have to bail out whenever their deregulated greed gambles away the billions of dollars they've extracted from workers. And what happens if mergers between giant corporations continue in a deregulated economy? You get a corporatocracy. That's the end game of deregulated capitalism. One corporation controls each industry. And what would life under a corporatocracy look like? History teaches us that a corporatocracy is fascism. In 1938, Mussolini dissolved Parliament and replaced it with a chamber of fascist corporations. Each corporation controlled an industry. In fact, Mussolini himself wrote that fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism because it is a merger of state and corporate power. So now we know what crony capitalism really is, and it highlights the need to regulate capitalism for the common good. And it also confirms that a successful democracy must first and foremost curtail the natural exploitive power of its wealthiest citizens. Overachievers in an economy have a right to be rewarded, but it's obscene that top CEOs now make 350 times more than the average worker. We can enjoy our lifetime on this planet far more without surrendering to the vain, planet-killing ideology of materialism. In a democratic society, no revolution is required to usher in the new age. Politicians depend on votes. They will steer the government to what people vote for. Corporations depend on sales. They will alter their behavior if people stop buying their products. In order to steer humanity towards a sustainable future, we have a responsibility to ferret out those politicians who have become puppets of the top 1% and stop voting for them. We have a responsibility to base our purchases on the actions of the companies that sell and manufacture the products we buy. Stop buying the products of companies that inordinately pollute and deplete the environment. Stop buying the products of companies who lavish their CEOs with inordinate wealth. Stop buying the products of corporate owners who make puppets out of politicians. It might be a little more costly now to starve wealthy predators by not buying their products, but it will be infinitely more costly in the future if our purchases continue to enable their gluttonous consumption and degradation of our living planet to maximize their short-term profit.